Possiamo iniziare.
I think we can start now.
Buonasera di nuovo a tutte e tutti.
Good evening, everybody,
Al webinar HydrogenEU,
and
come l'Unione Europea finanzia
welcome to
l'idrogeno.
the webinar Hydrogen EU, how the European Union finances hydrogen.
Grande rete di gruppi
I'm
ambientalisti
Eva
dei paesi
Pastorelli, and I'm part of a
influenzati
network of
dal
activists
cambio
of the
climatico da oltre 30
European,
anni,
Central and Eastern European
per la
area,
promozione della finanza pubblica e delle
who
politiche ambientali
are
e climatiche dell'Unione Europea.
working for
Do
the
il benvenuto al
transformation of public finances and monitoring the EU policies. And this is the last session of our Green Deal or greenwashing webinar series, which we have organized in the framework of a European project, which sees the participation of 9 European organizations who are asking at the European level more transparency and a more equal distribution of public fundings, and to put the voices of the local communities at the center of European policies. I would like to welcome the director of Counterbalance, Tobias Balance, a researcher at the Hamburg University, and Natalia Lueye, the local coordinator of the NGO Sustentarse from Chile. I would like to specify that we have simultaneous translation from and into English, Spanish, and Italian. You can write your questions in the Q&A session. Try to answer all the questions, but if we're not able to do so, we will answer later on. In the first of the 2 series of webinars, and the European Union open to the possibility to, and this is an emblem of the pressures of the lobbies, which want to seize public funds in order to keep the existing pipelines with the transport of hydrogen. The
per la
l'idrogeno blu stia risorgendo e ricevendo un sostegno politico, finanziario e normativo. Come dicevo, i progetti sull'idrogeno potranno godere,
and as I was saying, the project on hydrogen can be supported by the European Union as the European Investment Bank throughout the possibility to access new and existing initiatives like the Global Pathway Initiative. And in order to deal with this first aspect, I would like to ask a more in-depth information by Frank. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks very much. First of all, yes, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk a bit about our work here in this very interesting series of webinars. So as Eva already said, I will talk about a few of the European finance mechanisms related to which play a big role in the financing of hydrogen. I will talk about the EIB. I will talk about the Global Gateway, a very small comment on PCI, the Project of Common Interest, and then make a few more general remarks that on our vision of what we see with the public funding of hydrogen and what's really problematic about this. So first of all, about EIB. So the EIB, which was actually the European Investment Bank, is being seen internationally as a big green climate player, because in 2019 it was the first multilateral development bank to stop financing unabated fossil fuel projects, and until today it's still the only bank in this level of this like a multilateral development bank that has this position. But if you go look at it, of course, this is an important step. But if you go look a bit deeper into what they're actually doing and what's really in their policy, then you see that there are a lot more troubles. And they recently updated their energy policy, and hydrogen became much more prominent than it was before. And there are a few things to say about this. And one of them is, I can directly connect with what you were saying in the introduction, Eva. It's the presence of fossil fuels in the hydrogen policy, because we see that this allows for fossil fuels coming back through the back door, because we see in the policy a lot of room for hydrogen with CCS, hydrogen ready infrastructure, so which pipelines, for example, H2 Med, which I'm sure has been talked about here in earlier webinars, the proposal for a pipeline from Portugal to France, if I understand right. So this is the first problem where actually, like, you were financing hydrogen, and the whole idea, it's being framed as you say, like, it's okay, it's going to be green, but in the end you're prolonging the life of the fossil fuel sector. Then another issue that's really, really important there is that it really sticks to the unrealistically high targets, the hydrogen targets that the Commission made, and says that it tries to use its public money, the advantageous financial conditions that it can give as a public investment bank to reach these targets. This has an important consequence, because it means, because these targets are unrealistically high, it means that the strategy will not lead to investments for projects and renewable hydrogen that will really focus on these possibilities, where on these projects where there is no other option, where it's the most effective and efficient thing to do, which we think exists, but are like, it's a small quantity of the proposals on hydrogen that are out there. Then we see that this policy, it's also like it tries to create this or help with the creation of this hydrogen market, and so it means supporting private companies with public money to, like, kind of artificially inflate and ensure the demand and the production of the hydrogen. And it's not, the EIB is not the only mechanism for this. The Commission also created what's called the Hydrogen Bank, and this is like a kind of mechanism to give subsidies to companies by guaranteeing the prices of hydrogen of green hydrogen for both EU and international producers. So, and what we already see now, even though it's really the start of this policy, is that because the uptake of the hydrogen is so slow and the targets are so high, that the private companies, they're already asking for more public support. That the current measures are in place, are not enough. They want more. And these are very, it was on the news last week, for example, in Belgium, a company like Engie, which makes billions in profits, asks more support from the Belgian government to do the hydrogen projects. And what we see of this is that it's actually, if we look at what is needed, where we should put public money to have a transition to a green economy, that it's really a bad and inefficient allocation of resources. It's not even a really market thing, because you see that really the big commercial players, it's not a free marketing, it's the big commercial players who would use their lobby power to get access to a lot of public money at advantageous conditions. Then the last element on the global south is that you see that the policy of the EIB, which also gives more than 10 billion in loans outside of the EU per year, that it does not ensure that local population will benefit from the hydrogen projects. You see that it's very linked to the global gateway that we'll start talking about directly. That it's about serving domestic purposes of hydrogen for the EU market, and often working together with the European companies. Okay, so this is work on the EIB. And I will talk a bit more about the global gateway, but we will directly see that the two are linked with each other actually. So what is the global gateway? The global gateway is a kind of like external investment strategy that was presented 2 years ago by the Commission. And it's framed as the alternative to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. The basic idea of the global gateway is that you use development budget from the EU. For the people who are more knowledgeable about this, it's the EFSD Plus instrument, which gives guarantees to loans, and these guarantees are being combined with development with funds from member states, and then on top of this, loans from either the European Investment Bank or other national public investment banks, like we see, for example, hydrogen projects in the Global Gateway with KfW in Germany, AfD in France, and others. And what you also see actually is that this strategy uses the development money of EU to pursue the commercial and geopolitical goals that it has, and it really risks marginalizing a lot the development impact that this funding is supposed to have. There's a small extra that I would like to say about this, because tomorrow there will be a Global Gateway Forum, like a big, which normally is a day when the Commission organizes a dialogue with civil society on its development policies, and there's debate with CSOs, etc. And now it has used the Global Gateway to do a big promotion of its Global Gateway strategy and project. And this morning, an article, an analysis of the Global Gateway was published, and what's really relevant actually that we see is that when the strategy was being made in the EU, that there was a lot of uncertainty over to do this, because even inside the EU, and we see even inside the actors that are now among the leaders who are working on this project inside the Commission, that they were against this, and mainly because they didn't want to offend China so much. And that it was not of the Commission that works on development policy, but it should be a foreign affairs topic. And so we see actually that there was a lot of discord around this, and then all of a sudden, 2 years ago, the strategy was published, and toward the outside world, they say as if they're very sure about what they're doing and that there's this super big project, but actually there's a lot of internal disagreement about this, and this also shows in a very inconsistent strategy and things being slow to go. But let's go back to the details and why this is really important for a global gateway. Hydrogen projects in the global south are an important part of this strategy, because renewable energy, and this I imagine also has already been talked about, the renewable hydrogen can be produced much cheaper in some of countries in the global south than in the EU. And also because the resistance that is to be expected from this enormous renewable energy sites, that it suits people in the US, in the EU, that these are outside of, that they are in the periphery, that they're not here, and that this resistance happens somewhere far away, and that the environmental impacts that they're also far away. We found 10 hydrogen projects that are currently available that we found information about. Many of the projects are really in an early stage of implementation or still under negotiation. We see projects in Africa, namely in Namibia, Morocco, and Egypt. And we see projects also in Latin America, in Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, Panama, and then some Caribbean islands. We see also that there's a lot of European private companies involved, like, for example, Enel, also ExxonMobil, which is American, Hydrogen de France, Siemens, and Porsche. They also play a prominent role. I want to give a few examples. One is a pilot green hydrogen project in French Guinea, where it's the company Hydrogen de France that plays a role, and it was suspended for a few months because there were really a lot of protests, and it was blocked by local communities who don't want the plant on their land, and they claim that they have not even been consulted on the project. But now the project has been started again. Then another one, which maybe Natalia will talk about more, I don't know, but it's a project in Chile that really struck our attention. It's the development of a demonstration plant, which is called Haru Oni, and it's with the participation of Enel, Porsche, ExxonMobil, and Siemens. And Porsche, the German sports cars brand, they plan to use the fuels for racing cars and for the production of sports cars in the end. So it's really like, is this supposed to be a project for development? It's really, we don't really see where's the big societal need for this. And the methanol that they want to produce will not even be CO2 neutral, because there will be a carbon mixed into the fuel. And with all the long distance shipping that you have to do with the fuel, it's far from environmentally friendly solution. Then we also wanted to give a last project, which can be seen maybe as a kind of it's not a global gateway project, but it's very similar to the things on renewable and on hydrogen. It's a very big wind farm project in Kenya, Lake Turkana, and because what happened there was it was a project that was launched in the early 2000s to build the largest wind farm in Kenya, and it was financed with this kind of similar setup than how the global gateway looks like. You had a mix of development funds, public development investment banks from Europe, such as also the European Investment Bank, and then private investors who also came into it. For example, now BlackRock, the super big investment fund, is one of the partially owners of the project. And the private investors, they were not only protected, their investments were not only protected by the grants and the advantageous loans from the development banks, but also because the Kenyan Public Energy Company, they offered to buy the energy for a period of 20 years. And the terms of this agreement, they were so generous for the private investors that even the World Bank refused to participate in the project. And this kind of combination of public and private money, it resulted really into huge costs that the Kenyan taxpayers in the end had to bear. And it was also not respecting human rights because a Kenyan court has ruled that there were important land grabs that happening that local communities were the victim of this. Then I want to quickly say something about the projects of common interest. So what we also see is that the EU is interested in hydrogen in Ukraine. And this is really how to say, it's really absurd that the EU is doing this, because this country, of course, is at war and has so many direct needs for its own energy needs, for the reconstruction and its social infrastructure, etc. that why are you now going to invest in hydrogen? But in the common projects of common interest, which is like a list of interests of projects that can have advantageous status in the EU to receive budgets from the EU. This project was voted on 25th October. So this means that this project can get the money. If I see you nodding, am I starting to be out of time or? Okay, fine, good. I'm reaching the last part where I want to give just a few more like general remarks of how we see the European public investment strategy into hydrogen. And we see that it's part of a big focus on a tech-based vision on the transition to green economy. While what we actually need is a much more profound transformation of the economy itself, and where energy and resource use reduction should be central, and social justice, of course. Towards, if we are talking about the global gateway, it's really about a neo-colonial understanding of transition, because we are exploiting global south for their land and resources. We neglect the local needs, and we are really thinking about, okay, how can we replace direct fossil fuels with other energy inputs and use the same kind of economy and energy system for the rest. And we listen a lot to what are the fossil and hydrogen lobbyists that are asking for this. And this is also why we think it's super important to challenge the hydrogen projects inside the EU, because 50% of all the hydrogen that is supposed to feed this project is supposed to come from outside of the EU by 2030. And also we see that this kind of hydrogen investments, they rely a lot on international finance, and it means that a lot of Western capital decides what are the terms of the investments, what is the project's going to be like, how is it planned, how will it be implemented, and that it also uses the development funds. And this means that the recipient countries, that they don't have a say about this, and they cannot really make their own development trajectory. They cannot decide which kind of economy they want to build or society they want to build. There's also an issue of, like, for the low income countries, for example Namibia, it's really risky to try to rely on such a giga project as a kind of a developmental jackpot. Why? Because these countries do not have the kind of transmission and power generating capacity that you need to make these projects viable. And there are other countries who are a bit better developed for this, and that means that even if the global market for hydrogen would work out, the country like Namibia would risk already falling behind even before the start. And they're kind of betting on one horse, and it's a dangerous bet. And then, coincidentally or not, the EIB, which signed an agreement with Namibia about this, there is supposed to be a planned investment of 500 million euro in total. But from what we heard of them, they are really quite hesitant to invest in it because they don't see the business case happening. And then I want to look like the two really final remarks on this is that for us to have a just green transition, social transition, we have to use public finance in a way that puts the people and the environment first. And for this, the EIB and other public banks and funds, there needs to be much more democratic accountability about them, both in Parliament and for civil society. And this is actually not the case today. Well, that's what I had to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having given us this picture, this complex and complete scenario, and thanks for allowing us to have a sort of tour of the world in this sense.
Overview.
So I can now make the link to introduce next speaker. We've seen in previous webinars that Chile has been identified as a priority country for the production of green hydrogen to be exported to Europe. Beyond having already analyzed the unsustainability and inefficiency of the large-scale hydrogen production and transport chain, we've seen that all projects in Chile focus on coastal areas because of the large amount of desalinated water required for hydrogen production, with devastating impacts on already sacrificed area where large infrastructure threaten the availability of resources for the subsistence of local communities, such as fishing, but also biodiversity of area. So I would like to introduce the second speaker, Natalia Luege, territorial coordinator of the Chilean NGO Sustentarse, and I'll ask her to complete the picture we have outlined in the past webinars by describing the European Union's role in promoting hydrogen in Chile. Please, Natalia, can you please share your screen? Thanks, Eva. Good morning, everyone from Santiago. We are very happy because we are here in this solidarity space. We have the opportunity to underline trends in the global south, and we can also understand which is the impact of financing in our areas. I will have a presentation on the green hydrogen in Chile and the role of the European Union in promoting green hydrogen in Chile. First of all, some information about the national context. Chile has a radical and precocious neoliberal economic model. We have been laboratory of neoliberalism in mid-70s with the School of Chicago and its influence. And from that point of everything adds to the fact that the extraction of raw material is the main sector in our country with high cost for nature and for local territory. So the idea of minimal state of this model has allowed to deregulate private in favor of private sector and foreign investment. And these thanks to local conditions allowing to produce energy through cost-efficient and cost-effective mechanisms. There are huge pressures in terms of permits in the renewable energy and hydrogen sector in order to implement some project. And we already have huge production capacity, but we are trying to promote more and more this sector in the northern part of our country. For instance, there is so much energy produced by renewable energies, and this energy, the remaining, the unused energy is thrown away in a certain way. And as far as the hydrogen topic is concerned, in 2020, the National Green Hydrogen Strategy is created under the mandate of Sebastián Piñera, which aims to position the country as main H2 producer in LAC and to produce the cheapest H2 by 2050. And we have to say that for governors, green hydrogen was a way to hack the sun of our country and to export it all over the world. Chile has been considered as a champion, we can say, in the green hydrogen strategy. And we can also say that under Gabriel Boric's administration, this strategy is being promoted as one of the country's main development challenges. So it is a sort of poker game, we can say, in our country. So there is a referendum which is launched in 2022. Always in 2022, on the occasion of the COP in Egypt, the government collected resources by international financial institution, 1 billion dollars, sorry. And this year, in 2023, a fund has been created in order to promote green hydrogen sector. And we speak about here $1 billion, and I will speak about this in detail later on. Green Hydrogen Development Fund. This is in the slide, you find a facility, green hydrogen facility in Sylhet. This green hydrogen facility consists of $1 billion fund, 400 million will be provided by the IDB. The World Bank will allocate 150 million, and we have France and Germany, then $110 million by the development bank, the German Development Bank. Acronym is indicated in the slide. And I discovered that this bank was created with the Marshall Plan in order to rebuild Germany after the Second World War. And currently, it is an energy transition-oriented bank. And then we have $110 million by the European Bank for Investments. And in addition, the European Union will provide a grant of $16.4 billion. This fund has the objective of this fund is to accelerate the production of green hydrogen, mobilize commercial financing, contribute to strengthening an enabling environment for local capacity building in green hydrogen in Chile. And this project will be implemented over a period of 5 years between 2023 and 2028, and it consists of two components. The first component involves the granting of loans or sub-loans to H2V production projects or sub-projects for $143 million, mainly to finance electrolysis systems for plants with a capacity of between 10 and 100 megawatts. The financial program is used to finance this project, but also commercial banks and investment funds. And this fund is used within the Team Europe initiative. So the Team Europe initiative for the development of green hydrogen in Chile is a joint effort of the EU and its member state to enhance cooperation with Chile in the development of its green hydrogen economy. So the idea is to develop hydrogen production, and as I said, it is a joint effort with EU, member states, and the aim is to have a green hydrogen economy. And there are four main components. So the objective is to boost investment opportunities in the field of green hydrogen in Chile through strengthening the enabling environment for the green hydrogen economy, support to technological and human capital development, market development, and project development or financing. I can skip this slide because it is redundant. As far as the strengthening of these contexts favorable for the green hydrogen, we made reference to tools like green taxonomy, in vouchers, and so on. And Germany has helped Chile in defining its own strategy in the European Union, will continue to give support in this sense. And support has been also given in the implementation of green hydrogen project. But this attitude is a bit tricky as far as the technological development of human capital. Last year in December, in a pilot project having demo targets, we can say, and it was based on a cooperation with Siemens, Porsche. The project name was Haru Oni in the Chile, Patagonia. We used the first vehicle based fed with synthetic fuel. So here you see images showing the feeding mechanism and a gaucho near this car using this fuel, synthetic fuel. So here we have a union between traditional elements and future elements. As far as the support to the technological development, we can say that Fraunhofer, a German institution, and the CEA from France systems. And there was also the promotion and the participation of Chile continuous way in Erasmus Plus and Horizonte Europa, especially in the Green Hydrogen Partnership. And last but not least, there's the development of markets and commercial development, chambers of commerce in France, Germany, Spain, participate in an active way in exchanges on green hydrogen. And Holland is carrying out a study for assessing the hydrogen market. And then we have the program Low Carbon Business Action, specialized on exchange actions among European and European countries and Latin American countries, and in order to develop green hydrogen. The Green All Invest program focuses on transition to a circular economy with a low use of carbon. And then a memorandum of understanding has been signed with the Ministry of Energy in Chile and Rotterdam, Anvers, and Hamburg in order to plan the importation of hydrogen, green hydrogen from Chile. This slide shows you the financing by the European Investment Bank. We speak about $110 million We have monitored it through the alert system. It's a system monitoring 15 financial institutions, and it uses a specific platform allowing to identify cases, specific cases, beforehand. So this is a project that has been published in June. It has been approved, and it will be then moved to Golfo, which will then manage the project, and it is under the umbrella of the Ministry of Energy. So I'm almost at the end of my presentation. Here you see the global gateway. We already heard about it. This diagram shows you this structure. We have the Global Gateway, the Team Europe initiative, and the creation of the fund. Team Europe is part of this from the two banks I mentioned before. Just to conclude, I just want to mention what's happening in Chile. What's the situation in terms of hydrogen production? We have Antofagasta in the northern part of the country, and it is an area showing a huge impact. It has been developed a lot over the last years. And then we have the Magallanes in the southern part of Chile. We try to develop all projects in all Chile, but we have to say that now in these two territories, we have more than 60 projects. Antofagasta is located in the Atacama Desert and has a very, very favorable conditions for solar and wind power generation. Magallanes in Chile's Patagonia region. This area is a very important area because there are wind parks, wind farms, we can say, and if fully exploited, 30% of the world's demand for fuel could be satisfied. So it is estimated that 2,900 wind turbines could be installed in this region, occupying an area of 150,000 hectares in areas of high ecological and landscape value. So we have many manifestations and protests in these two areas. Above all, against the idea of creating these wind farms and against desalinizers. And this is the only way in order to obtain water for producing hydrogen, but there are impacts and repercussions on fishing sector. And in Magallanes, there are water sources that can be used, but it's better to desalinate water in order to then produce hydrogen, because that way water won't need purification. I conclude here my presentation and thank you for the time given. Thank you. Thank you very much for this detailed scenario. I believe that these webinars can represent a moment in order to create a network among the different networks. I don't know if counterbalance already new sustentarse. So there's the possibility of creating networks. And I would like to conclude with this webinar with the last two talks, which take us to South Africa.
I'd like to start with Ulrike Tinken from South Africa, and I would like to ask her how is developing the situation with green hydrogen in South Africa, and what are the civil society organizations' stance? The floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome from Gqeberha in South Africa, previously known as Port Elizabeth. Yes, just to give you guys some more context within the South African situation. Since the start of South Africa as colonies and so on, majority of our economy was basically built on extractivism and the export of raw materials from South Africa to the global north. Initially, it was a gold boom, shortly followed by a coal boom, and then shortly followed by a diamond boom. And then all of the subsequent industries flowed out of that. And these are the industry that our country is built on. So since the inception of South Africa up until today, majority of the South African economy is based on extracting South African resources and taking it elsewhere, and then we just rebuy the finished products. So with that context and with all of the different conflicts and stuff that happened due to the resources being extracted in South Africa, there's been lots of social and political upheavals, and also many rights being violated by people throughout the years. And this is part of the reason why there's such big caution when it comes to any new industry coming into South Africa, because we've had hundreds of years of experience of people coming to take our stuff and then we're not getting any rewards from it and so forth. So this is more or less the context that South Africa is in terms of resources. In terms of energy and sufficiency or self-reliance or self-sufficiency, South Africa is kind of refinding its feet again. At the moment, we are having multiple issues, including efficient energy supply, so that we do not have power cuts, or how we would say in South Africa, load shedding. This is due to an ineffective power utility that basically is running a monopoly within the country. And due to this power utility known as Eskom, alongside Sasol, which is a big oil producer, well, petrochemical company in South Africa, South Africa can't claim innocence when it comes to the climate crisis. Because of these big extractive industries, South Africa is in the top 20 polluting countries globally, within a historical context and within current data. And continent-wide, we are obviously number one. So we also are cognizant of our impact that we are having on our planet, especially those of us that are focused more on environmental safeguarding and energy efficiency and just transition and all of these things. However, we are trying to also promote alternatives that are more environmentally friendly. But because we have this long history of our power utility being the main extractor of coal within our country and one of the biggest polluters globally, there's vested interest for them to continue with the fossil fuel industry as is. The same goes for Sasol, because From what I understand, Sasol was the first company in the world, or the first entity in the world, to transform coal to liquid fuels during the time of apartheid. So that is something that they like to brag upon. And South Africa has lots of existing oil refineries and gas refineries that have been established unjustly and have impacted not just the environment, but the people as well. So now we've got this context of us not having enough energy, having these experiences of extractivism from the past and also from the present. Now, as we're looking for alternatives to solve or to try and address the climate crisis, hydrogen, especially with the focus on green hydrogen, has came to the foreground. And from a scientific perspective and from just a normal climate perspective in terms of mitigating the issues of climate change, hydrogen is a good replacement fuel for our current fossil fuel economies that we are currently running. However, what many civil society organizations are cautious over is the repeat of the mistakes from the past, whereby there's no socio-economic justice aspects being placed in or placed into these agreements so that the communities and the environment where these plants are to be built are safeguarded. So because of all of this and because of our history, South Africa has got very rigid laws in terms of extracting resources, whereby initially or usually the normal state is when somebody wants to come and develop something, they'll have to do a social impact assessment study, they have to do a feasibility study, they have to do an environmental impact assessment study. But due to the urgency of the climate crisis, as well as the big driving force coming from the global north, where countries from the European Union, countries like America and Japan is pushing for new resources to clean up their economies, they are pushing for countries such as South Africa and the global south to opt for green hydrogen at an accelerated pace. So what our government has decided to do is to grant 9, and I think the number has now probably doubled up to 19 right now, that these projects have been granted what we call strategic infrastructure project categorization, meaning that these safeguarding steps that are within South African legislature can either be bypassed or shortened or done at the same time, where they just run all of the things at the same time, which is not helpful from a community perspective, and also from an environmentalist perspective, and also just from a justice or social perspective. Because you will find cases such as what's happened in the Northern Cape, in the Namaqualand region recently, whereby you will have an announcement made on Friday that no, on Monday we will be talking about the feasibility study, and then on Tuesday there will be a public hearing about the environmental impact assessment, and so on. So there's no real time for people to digest these different concepts and stuff, because it's happening at an accelerated pace, and our government and all of the different decision makers are eager to please those that are providing funds, whether in the forms of loans or in the form of, I forgot the word now, English is running away, in the form of loans or in the form of donations or like support mechanisms whereby they give funding for development of projects. Our governments usually just would accept these loans or these grants, not reading the fine print, not seeing whether there's actual rehabilitation money or budget set aside for after the end of the project, or whether there's socio-economic aspects, so where the community will benefit. And also addressing the big elephant in the room within the South African context, we require energy. We are having energy shortfall within the country. Now, to give green light to different projects that will be building renewable energy power plants, be it solar farms or be it wind farms, majority, if not all of that electricity will be going to the electrolyzers to generate green hydrogen. And then none of that electricity will help us address the energy shortfall that we are currently having. And this is mainly due to the negotiations between our decision makers and the decision makers of big business and the governments of the global north. So we are kind of in a catch-22. Yes, we are sort of partly responsible for the climate crisis due to our pollutive past. We are also to blame for promoting new and more intricate fuel technologies, such as our solid coal to liquid fuel process that we kind of patented back in, I think, the 50s or the 60s during apartheid, whereby that actually makes more greenhouse gas emissions in order to transform coal from a solid state to make it into liquefied petroleum. So we've got a major impact. And instead of addressing this in a just way and including people and also making big plans to decarbonize our own economy, our government and our decision makers are mostly looking for giving our resources to help decarbonize Europe and America and Japan, whereby we will still be having a heavily pollutive industry. And then secondly, these big companies such as Sasol, which one plant in Secunda basically pollutes more than the whole of Germany. Their one petrochemical plant literally pollutes in 1 year the same amount of pollution that the entire country of Germany emits. So when it comes to different economic mechanisms that takes place globally, such as your cross-border adjustment mechanism or your CBAM, that will be taking into effect next year in the European Union, majority of these heavily pollutive industries within South Africa is looking for new ways in which they can escape that tax, that carbon tax that will be placed on their products that will be sold in Europe. So companies that pollute a lot, such as Sasol, such as Anglo-American, such as all of these different extractive industries, like your mining companies, your chemical companies, and all of them, they are now pushing for the hydrogen market to continue, not specifying specifically green hydrogen. They're not being honest and saying that, no, we are being motivated to decarbonize our company to address the climate issue. No, they're looking at their fine lines on their budgets because majority of their clientele is based in Europe. So now we are stuck with companies who want to transition, but not for the people's sake or not for the planet's sake. They want to transition for their pockets. And it's a good thing to kind of keep companies accountable by means of addressing their pockets, but they will take shortfall somewhere else. Within the environmental sector, we have different acronyms and different stuff that we talk about, but whenever there's profit at one place, there's loss at another. It is something that is inescapable. So the biggest worry that many of the activists on the ground have is that we will not be reaping any benefits from this new developing industry within our country. That is our biggest worry, because we will see the global north is decarbonizing, we are not. Or there's lots of development happening regarding hydrogen fuel cell cars and all of these different things, whereby we will still be stuck with fossil fuel combustion engines, whereby we will still continue to pollute, whereby other countries will be developing and decarbonizing properly. Our country has had aims and high hopes for establishing this green hydrogen economy within South Africa. We have been caught off guard by our Minister of Minerals, DMRE, the Department of Minerals, Energy and Mineral Resources and Energy, whereby he just announced a hydrogen roadmap, whereby there was no public consultation on this roadmap or nothing. This was in 2021, and then most of us were like, okay, well, what is this about? And then early in 2022, we came up with a green hydrogen commercialization strategy, also with minimal public participation. So there was no input for us to say that, no, why can't this be there? Why is that there or not? So our issue is we don't have access to water. We don't have access to energy in this country, and we also don't have access to decision-making processes like we are supposed to, given our current state. So let me just end it there. But the main issue is we have public participation processes in place, but due to the accelerated push coming from the global north, our governments are using shortcuts such as strategic infrastructure projects, classifications to shortcut these processes and do us an injustice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrich. This is why the fight should be global, because we are seeing the same dynamics here in the north, in Europe. This is where everything starts.
So we have common battles. And now we can conclude this first webinar with the talk by Tobias Colt, a political ecologist and researchers at the University of Hamburg, who drafted, together with other researchers, the study between Greece, extractivism and energy justice, competing strategies in South Africa's hydrogen transition in the context of climate crisis, that contributes to the debate on justice in the global energy transition. Tobias, what are the results of your analysis, which takes into account also the context which has been described by Ulrich? So it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Eva. I'm trying to share my screen now. Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, I feel honored to be part of this highly interesting webinar series and to be part of this great lineup of speakers. In the interest of time, I will try to keep it short so we have a bit of time for discussion. Yes, so I will talk a bit about the South African case as well that Ulrich already introduced now, and I will focus on the different models for a hydrogen economy or hydrogen sector that exist in the debate in South Africa. So different actors have different ideas about how the hydrogen sector should look like, and I will highlight this, and then I will also speak a bit of the role of international finance in this. So the paper has been just published in the Review of African Political Economy. It's co-authored with my wonderful colleagues Jenny Simon, Johanna Thun, and Jesko Hennig. It's unfortunately paywall, so if you like to access it, please send me an email and I can send it to you. Otherwise, we can also maybe send it around after the call. I will skip the context because Ulrich has already said everything has to be said about the context in which the hydrogen transitions of Africa takes place. I will also skip most of what's to be said about the policy development because Ulrich talks about just maybe if we look at the map, where are these projects? Ulrich talked about the strategic integrated projects. Those are the ones in the map, at least from last year, the data is from last year. And then you also see in the upper right-hand corner, the blue line. This is the hydrogen valley that's supposed to be built that connects the platinum mining region in the north, in Limpopo, with the industrial areas in Johannesburg, in the Gauteng area, and then the port in Richards Bay. So when we looked at how the hydrogen sector in South Africa is developing, we found that there's not just one model that's being pursued, but competing initiative with different ideas of how the hydrogen sector should look like. And the first and the most dominant one is what we term green extractivism. So the aim is to create an export-oriented sector for the export of green hydrogen and of low-value products such as green ammonia. This strategy is pursued by international governments, by the EU, by Germany, multinational corporations, and international finance institutions. And its strategy is really to build up partnerships between governments in the north and south, between the South African government and the EU and the German government, and to also build public-private partnerships with businesses. So the strategy is to attract investment into South Africa, and to do this, the state should reduce the economic risk to investors, and I will come back to that in a second. The second initiative we found is what we term green developmentalism. So this is pursued by the domestic industry in South Africa and the multinational industry active in South Africa. It's partly supported by part of the South African government, and the aim here is to capture more economic value through green industrial development in South Africa. So by, for example, using green hydrogen domestically, Ulrich spoke about CBAM and the threat of a loss of competitiveness of the iron, steel, and chemical industry in South Africa. So one idea is to use green hydrogen there for these industries. There's also the aim to build new industrial linkages with the platinum industry. Most of the platinum in the world is mined in South Africa. Platinum is an input into fuel cells and electrolyzers. And then there's the idea to build new value chains around that. So producing fuel cells and electrolyzers, as well as wind and solar components in South Africa. So the strategy then is really to build these integrated industrial ecosystems, like I showed on the map with the Hydrogen Valley. But the big problem is, since green hydrogen is priced at a premium, and the South African government doesn't have the fiscal space to subsidize green hydrogen at large scale, the strategy is now to prioritize first an export-oriented sector, because for that there is international finance available, and then as a second step, build a domestic sector once green hydrogen gets cheap enough. So that's a bit of a, I would say, risky strategy, because there's the risk of locking in an export-oriented pathway and the domestic transition may not emerge. The third strategy, third initiative we found is what we call fossilism. So Ulrich also talked already about Sasol, the big petrochemical company. They're also involved in a lot of green hydrogen projects, but part of its strategy is also to protect its fossil fuel business model. So they want to transition out from coal to fossil gas, and also looking into blue hydrogen with carbon capture and storage in a way to secure their business model. And then the last strategy, or last initiative we found, is driven by social movements and civil society. There's strong social movements in South Africa, and Ulrich is a representative of one of the organizations strongly involved there. And the aim here is to counter this extractivist model of green hydrogen, and the strategy is to build capacities now to network. In some parts of the country, there have also been right to say no campaigns around hydrogen projects. And within social movements and civil society, the different approaches coexist. So there are those that regard green hydrogen as a false solution, and there are those that seek to make it the sector more inclusive, making sure that communities are involved, that they benefit, and that there are social environmental safeguards, and so on. So just briefly, I want to zoom in on the role of international finance. So as you all know, the hydrogen sector is a very capital-intensive sector. It requires large amounts of funding. And now investors from the global north have become interested in South Africa as an investment destination. And they are interested in building this export-oriented extractivist sector. But most funding today is actually public finance. So in the first stage of this project, when there's feasibility studies, there's public money going in there. And in the second stage as well, at the stage where green hydrogen is not yet commercially viable, there are subsidies from the German and European Union, from Germany and the European Union through the Hydrogen Bank or H2 Global to close that price gap. So there's a lot of public money in there. And the role of the state next to that is also to de-risk the investment. So through public money and by shifting the economic risks of these projects from the private sector to the public. And some of the potential impacts then are that there are financial dependencies created and strengthened between the South African state and foreign investors and foreign governments. There's also the risk of increasing debt, because a lot of these investments are also loans. And then in order to service the debt, there's the risk of austerity politics and of extractivism to gain revenue to pay off the debts. So in conclusion, we argue that there are various initiatives of different goals, different actors, and strategies that struggle over the hydrogen future. And we can see that the emerging hydrogen sector in South Africa, it reflects strong export orientation, so strong extractivist tendencies. And this is in turn reflective of the interests of the EU and Germany and the international financiers. And some of the reasons why this initiative is dominant and why it's so difficult to pursue alternative development pathways, to pursue sovereign industrial development, are economic, financial, and technological dependencies. So, for example, dependencies on international off-takers, on international finance, on patents held by multinational corporations, and so on. But this extractivist model is nonetheless challenged. So it's challenged by fossil fuel interests, as well as by industrial capital that seeks to capture more value in South Africa. And it's challenged by movement-driven initiatives that resist green extractivism and struggle for the social ownership over resources and energy. And the way these struggles play out will impact the shape of the sector, will impact whose interests are realized and who benefits and who loses. And this is it. Looking forward to the debate. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Tobias, and thanks for having respected time so that we can have some space for questions. Just a minute, just to see the questions. So the first question has already received an answer by Frank indirectly on the quantity of resources for the hydrogen sector, but Frank already answered. I asked Frank to answer to the second question, the question by Rinami. So please tell us more about the EIB $500 deal with Namibia. So Rainani asked, did you say that the investment is unlikely to take place as the investor doesn't see business potential in the project? Can you answer, Frank, please?
Yes, okay, I'm already on. Good. Yeah, well, just to give more first the context in which I said this. So I said this based on a civil society event organized by European Investment Bank in May, where we went and we talked about this project. And then they said to us, like, we don't really see the business case yet for this project. For the moment, we don't see that we can invest in it. And we give technical, we think of giving technical assistance to them, but that's it. However, my colleague sent me a tweet of the Commission President van der Leyen, and I said this because that's what I mentioned. Like, there's this big summit on the Global Gateway happening, where she announced actually that really like 6:45, where she announced that the project is approved and that there is 1 billion from the Global Gateway going to this project. I didn't see yet anything specifically about EIB. I would have to check this. I can do it very quickly now, but I just wanted to say this. And then, of course, they say it like, no, it's not only for the hydrogen, it's also because in Namibia, they have a partnership on green hydrogen and also about critical raw materials. So it's unclear, but I imagine that it's the initial project should be part of it. So I was the reality was faster than I spoke.
Thanks, Frank. Second question for Natalia. Sami asks if there are documents or sites in order to see more detail about the energy colonization in Antofagasta on Magallanes. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Sami. And the answer is yes. There is an article that has been written by our director for an organization working on energy transition topics. And I share now the link in the chat so that you can access it. Okay, there's a request for the paper by Tobias. I already spoke with Tobias, and Tobias told me that it's possible to have it. I don't know, Tobias, if you have a link or if you prefer to send it to us and then we can send it to participants. Usually after the webinars, we send the recordings and the presentations of different speakers to participants via email. So I don't know, maybe in one way or another we can make it available.
Yes, I can send the link, but the link to the paper, it's paywalled, but I can send the paper to Eva and then Eva can send it to the participants.
Perfetto. Thank you. Thank you, Tobias. Vedo che c'è stato uno scambio sulla
I see there was an exchange on desalinization among two participants. So I don't know if there has been already an answer, but I think so. I don't see other questions because some questions already received an answer. I see Ulrike. Please go ahead.
Apologies, I was talking with my mic muted. Regarding the question whether Namibia has the, let me just get the question properly, whether Namibia doesn't have the transmission and power generating capacity to successfully develop the market. That is true. Namibia, along with many other countries within the Southern African region, get majority, if not all of their electricity from South Africa. This is one funny context I wanted to end off with. We supply electricity to Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Lesotho and Swaziland, yet we still have power cuts. So green hydrogen being developed in these countries is kind of ironic given that they don't have electricity transmission within their economies to actually run their countries properly without the aid of South Africa. And yet we still have not enough electricity. So it's kind of weird. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Ulrike, for the for having seen the question. Natalia, I don't know if you already sent the link of the article. Yes, I see that you're answering. Okay. Yes, I sent it in the chat, but I sent it just to speakers and not to participants. Okay, I don't think there are other questions. So before closing, I just want to thank, oh, Frank, sorry. Frank, I see your hand raised.
All right. No,
please.
I just wanted to say, like, I quickly checked the communication of EIB on the Namibia project, and they didn't say anything about this. So, yeah, I don't really know. And I just wanted to give a quick comment on, it was something that Ulrich said in his presentation on the lack of input in the decision-making process, and that this was also like that. As such, there are some like there is a possibility to give input on the decision-making, but that this is pressured a lot by the global north, and it also, like, I make me think then again on what Tobias said about for example, in South Africa, that they, in this developmentism model, if I understood it right, that their idea is like, okay, first we do the export model, and then later on we can develop for ourselves. Because I think it's really a manifestation of where it's the demand of capital in the rich countries which guide the decision-making process, and that here we really have an important problem. And it's like, kind of, for me, it's like a common line here, that we see that it's the same economic system, just with slightly different technologies, and that's really the problem that we are facing, I think.
No, Ulrich, se volete scambiare.
Ulrich, I don't know if you want to tell something. You can take the floor.
No, I'm happy. I'm just agreeing with Frank.
Sì, concordiamo tra di noi.
Okay, we know the situation. Okay, so if there are no further questions, before concluding and giving technical information to participants, I really want to thank speakers of today's webinar. It has been the last webinar concluding the series. It has been extremely interesting. So I believe really this series of webinar has been really interesting and enriching. So thank to speakers, to all the speakers and the participants who have animated these webinars together. This is the last webinars of the series. You can find the recordings of the two first webinars on the YouTube channel of Recommon. We will upload this third webinar in the next days, and we will share with participants presentations and some of the documents we mentioned. And for the question by Giovanni, we will keep you updated on future activities. You can subscribe newsletters, Recommon and Counterbalance and ODG and Earth Life Africa and Sustentarse. So you can subscribe to the newsletter. All details are available on the Recom website, and if you have questions, you can also write to us, and we will do our best to answer. I thank the interpreters who supported us during these webinars from English into French, into Italian, and into Spanish. Tobias, please. Okay. Sorry. I saw your hand raised. And so thank you. See you in the coming future. Thanks for your participation and enjoy your evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Hi, everyone.